Chapter 8, Chunking.
This chapter introduces another NLP strategy, which is chunking, again adapted for translators and interpreters. It begins looking at the trainee translator's tendency to translate locally, so to speak, that is to say, at a word for word level rather than globally, accounting for intent and contexts. We begin with an example from a former student of mine.
Yeah, she was stuck, like many, if not most, trainee translators at the conduit or local level of translating. Learning to use the chunking strategy is designed to help trainees and, let's say, risk averse professional translators and interpreters move from a more local to a more global approach.
There are three main elements which may be learned through applying a list of procedural questions similar to those in the meta model.
Chunking up generalizes. It automatically takes the term and the whole text out of its specific context and makes it less culture bound. This strategy also helps identify text types or genres.
And even if texts are almost always hybrid, framing a text into a type will help consider audience expectations and then to what extent a translator or interpreter will want to meet those expectations.
Chunking down does the opposite and moves from the chunked up, more vague or metaphoric, through to the more particular, and then further down to the constituents that make up or define the term.
Chunking laterally is the strategy for taking language and texts out of one context or culture bound reality and re anchoring them in another context. To a large extent, translation scholars have battled either for or against lateral chunking, which represents the freer end of the faithful Freak line.
So we give examples of what happens when culture-bound lexis, behavior, and orientations are chunked, and how translations can be improved by mindful chunking.
The chunking procedure can also be used to highlight what can sometimes happen when the faithful or functional equivalence is adhered to mindlessly. And by using the procedure, we can see that faithfulness can sometimes lead to distortion of the intended meaning.
And that this faithfulness can actually lead to more stereotyping and possibly strengthened ethnocentric response, given the fact that the reader or the listener will automatically filter what is written or heard according to their own culture shared value systems.
There's the nice example of European and American valuing of money and how chunking can clarify the issues in translation and solve them.
Yes, I like that example too. And we finish the chapter with the logical levels of a translator's or interpreter's task, taking a leaf once again from Benjamin's Task of the Translator. The translator or interpreter here has now moved from that initial trainee local level of translating to take on the role of the more global oriented mediator.
Using the logical levels model and procedural questions, we can tease out what is it that is going on, to quote Goffman.
Nicely put.